so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and thanks for giving me the time to chat to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for making it all the way up to our little roastery thing at Netlingshof. So appreciate you making the journey.
It's a really cool spot. So what made you decide to do this? Like, how come there's a spot here?
Relationships mostly. So I mean, coffee was an interest of ours through rugby. I think when you travel to the same location for 10 years in a row, you get a bit bored of doing all the touristy things. So you start getting interested in going to cool cafes and enjoying coffee, and that's kind of what we did on our off day. And then the thought popped out, like, why can't we create a interesting space at home that people enjoy and they like through coffee? And I think coffee is this strange connector between people. You know, when you want to meet up with somebody, you say, oh, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Even if you're just going to go drink tea or a Coke or something, you go, let's go grab a cup of coffee, because that's what it means to people, is to connect.
I agree. And a good coffee spot is always a way to meet people and have a good chat, you know, a good catch up.
I think the essence of a good coffee spot is not just coffee, it's like the environment that it creates, you know. And I wanted to in our little cafe down in town and this space, you want to create a place where people can just sit, you know, no pressure, nothing about it that makes you feel forced to do anything. Just sit and have a good cup of coffee and just, I suppose, decompress. Like, things are quite fast paced these days and they move quickly, and you need a place to just slow down a little bit and just kick back and hopefully just relax.
I agree. And the rugby lifestyle is a super fast lifestyle, and you guys are always traveling and going places on the circuit. Has there been a favorite place of yours, place that you love visiting, a place that has really good memories for you?
I think they've all got their positives. I mean, if you're going to travel around and be ungrateful about where you are, you're just a spoiled little shit then anyway, you know. So I think the whole part about traveling to new places is exploring and sort of immersing yourself in what that city and what that culture has to offer. And that's what we try to do as much as possible. I mean, you get sort of one day off in the week that you're there, and we'd sort of try to go do some touristy things, try to get involved into the local cafe vibe, try to just take it all in. So I think everywhere you go has got its own thing. Like I loved Vancouver. London's always incredible. It's just busy and fast paced. Hong Kong is the same. We genuinely traveled some incredible places like Russia, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of Hong Kong, many different places in Australia, because that changed, the place changed on the circuit, Singapore, Japan, New Zealand, the USA, Brazil for the Olympics. So just good places, man. Like, and I think everything's got the upside.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about Brazil, the Olympic Games. I think that is an amazing opportunity. You guys are representing South Africa on the world stage at all times, but is it a different feeling going into an Olympics?
Yeah, completely different actually. Like the Olympic Games were probably the biggest eye opener I had for sport. You know, I think we've got a very much in South Africa we've got a culture of like kind of first or last kind of thing. You know, if you don't win, then you're not anything. And it's a very interesting experience going to the Olympics where you arrive there and you realize, like, of these 20,000 athletes, or however many there are, there's many thousands, that there's a couple hundred medals up for grabs. Yeah. And with a typical South African mindset, you go like, well, what are the rest of them doing here? Like, why are you here if you're not going to win a gold medal? I mean, even with our criteria for SASCOC to send teams, they're kind of like, you must be a medal hopeful or nothing, or you don't go. You know, and I think when you mill around the village and you see the different athletes, and you go to the opening ceremony and you see how proud people are to be there and to represent their country, you start realizing, like, this is what sport is about, is that we're all on this common ground of sport, and I get to bring my flag and represent my country as best as I can, and that's all that it's about. Like, the medals and winning is all wonderful, but that's super cream on top. Like, the value in it is that you get to show, like, represent your flag on the world stage.
So let's go back to the first or last mentality with South African sports, and especially rugby, because rugby is a massive culture in South Africa. Everyone watches the Springboks and the Sevens, and I mean, Cape Town Sevens is always a massive event.
Yeah.
How do you deal with kind of the people, the media and everyone that comes to you if you guys aren't necessarily playing well or having the best season?
Yeah.
How do you bounce back from that?
Man, like we got shit after the Olympics for getting a bronze medal.
Yeah.
You know, I got given shit by people like public, like walking up to me in the street and like, oh, what happened at the Olympics? You guys got a bronze, and I'm like, yeah, we got a medal.
Yeah, it's huge.
You know, it's which is, you know, you think it's in your head it's sort of a big deal, but for a lot of people, they're like, no, it's gold or nothing, and ultimately, what it comes down to is like who you choose to listen to. What are the voices that you choose to, or who and which voices do you choose to listen and value in your life? So, and it comes down to people who you value. You know, like is that person in your life for a long term or for a very short term purpose? So, if somebody you bump into at a shopping center and they kind of like, you know, wow, you guys really bombed out at the Olympics. I mean, like, is that person? Are they there for? Like, I don't know, are they there to get the reaction out of you, or are they there to just see what your comment is on it, or is it like your family, or is it your best mates that tell you like, hey, hard luck at the Olympics, you guys were awesome, kind of thing?
Yeah.
And that's where you start placing value on who you choose to listen to and what kind of effect it has on your mindset. It's very difficult because often it's the most negative voices that speak loudest, or the ones that get heard, first. But ultimately, it comes down to who is your close circle? Who do you choose to put value in you know, what they say, and kind of like, don't read too much into people. People are like essentially quite fickle, to be honest.
Yeah. So I mean, going back to when you were coming up into the Springbok side, who were some of the guys that you looked at, and that kind of guided you to become the player that you are now?
I think when I joined, some of the friendly faces around were like Mpho Mbiozo. He was one of the first people that I saw. I mean, he was at UCT a little bit before me. So when I joined the squad, it was incredibly intimidating and daunting. And to see such a happy face welcoming you, another UCT brother in the team, another Ike. It was good to see that. And then Paul Delport, I went to school with Paul Delport, and he was in the squad at the same time as me. So that's another familiar face. But then, like, the captain at the time, Zwandile Stick, was fantastic. Some of the older guys, Frankie Horn, you know, the three of them were really good at making me feel comfortable in the squad.
How did you get into sevens? Because I mean, we grew up playing 15s.
No, I know it's actually quite a cool story for like kids to listen to, and I've tried to like fashion it in a way that it's good for kids to listen to. It's so 2008, I played in the Varsity Cup. For UCT in the very first Varsity Cup. I don't know if how old were you guys? You guys were 8.
Yeah.
So I really remembered we lost to Marties in the final. Yeah. It was the very first Varsity Cup. We went in ranked 8th. We beat everybody in the round robin stage, and then won the semi-final against Puka, and then had Marties scheduled to play at home, but we didn't have lights at UCT because we don't really take rugby that seriously. So
yeah.
And we had to play at Darnie Craven, and we lost in the final minute there. So unbelievable campaign, unbelievable season. Went on to play with UCT first in the regular league season, and then a little bit of Western Province under 21, but like a little bit. I think I played 6 or 7 minutes the entire season of it. So a lot of training went in, very fit, strong, healthy, good. And at the same time, the UCT guys had been taking a break, you know, they're off season. So then September rolls around, and we go for testing on a Monday night at Sports Science. That's just pre-season testing, like baseline fitness, strength, all that kind of thing. And I'd been training hard, you know, with Western Province. So I tested really well on this sort of random Monday night. And I think in that sort of sports science fraternity, everybody kind of knows each other, and they keep a lookout for, this guy tested well, and they're looking. So the bio that did the testing, biokineticist that did the testing there, I think he had a mate, or his mate was previously at sports science, and he was now the strength and conditioning coach of the Sevens side.
Oh, wow.
So I sent him like a name or two from the testing, UCT testing, and said, these guys tested quite well, you know, should give them a call. So the next morning, Tuesday morning, I actually had a voicemail from Paul True, was the Springbok Sevens coach, and which I honestly thought was a bit of a laugh. Like I thought somebody was having me on, and so almost didn't even call back or anything. And you know, I did, and he invited me to a training session at Belleville at the HBC with Western Province. They were playing against Western Province, and that was kind of what I spoke about. Was when I arrived in the change room, sort of walked into the Springbok Sevens change room and pulled on a training jersey and played some matches against the Western Province Sevens side. Kind of from there, everything is history, and like the moral of the story is for kids, like I was saying, the chat is that you never really know who's watching. Like, it's a weird Monday night, and it's a bit of a nothing affair. You're testing for pre-season for Varsity Cup 2009. And you test as best as you can, and then all of a sudden somebody's having a look. But you didn't know that. I didn't know that. And then they speak to a friend. They said, and next thing I'm invited to a training session. So it's super opportunistic, and it worked out really well. But it's like I said, the moral of that story is kind of give all you got. You never know who's kind of watching.
Exactly. You look at guys like Cheslin, Kobe, and Kwagga Smith and Bellow. They are having a lot of success in 15s form of rugby after their sevens career. Has there been any thought from you to move back into 15s?
Obviously I'm retired, so I'm not playing any rugby ever again, ever again. So no, not right now. But I think around the age of about 24, 25, there was definitely some thoughts of going to 15s, but again, it was all part of the environmental cycle of sevens. Like when I joined, it was pretty low key. I think the sevens setup was still being used as a bit of a stepping stone. At the time when I joined, Robert Eberson had joined and Philip Snyman had joined, and then at the end of that first season, they both left to Free State.
Okay.
Which I think was quite a regular affair. Like guys would come onto the circuit and make their name, and then find themselves a Super Rugby contract somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in line for a contract anywhere, so sevens was my first shot and pretty much only shot. So I felt strangely loyal to the setup. And it sort of progressed over the next 2 or 3 years, and similar stuff was happening, but we were also building a bit of a team where I think Chris Dry joined at the time, Branko de Press, Cecil Africa, Frankie Horn, and all these guys had kind of committed their time to sevens, and with not any intention of let's do this here, build a name and leave kind of thing. We decided that's what we're going to do. And I think at the similar time, Paul Truitt sat me down and said, listen, I'm looking at you to be captain of the side in the next 12 months or so. And you start getting itchy feet and oh, maybe I should go play some Super Rugby. And I thought to myself, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna captain a national side, and now you want to go fight it out. You want to slog it out on a Super Rugby bench to maybe make the team. So for what? For this, because it's this at the time was a credibility thing. Yeah. Sevens wasn't really that credible, but Super Rugby, if you played Super Rugby, you play rugby. And I think one of the best career decisions I ever made was to stay at sevens. I think we were lucky enough to be part of the best 10 years of growth in sevens, and also to be included and involved in so many wonderful events like the Commonwealth Games and World Games and Olympic Games and series wins and lots of different tournament wins. And I think that was solely down to making the decision to stay put at the sevens with a couple of other guys and just go let's build something awesome here and let's hang around.
I think the whole thing around the sevens is that it's different. It's something new. It's something fresh. It's a quick form of the game. It's really fun to watch, and to have a national side that performed as well as you guys did, and they're still performing unbelievably well, has really promoted sevens to where it is now, where it's one of the biggest national sports essentially. Yeah,
I think again fairly opportunistic moments. I think again sevens was always going to be an exciting sport. But the growth plan in South Africa was, I think, fairly accelerated in the last 5-6 years, where the Springboks went through some really difficult times. So, I think we've been fairly quite consistent over the last 10 years of performance-wise and success. But at the same time, you kind of outshone by the Springbok team, which is fairly standard, quite normal, But then they went through... couple of years back, they went through 2 seasons or 3 seasons of really struggled, and where at the same time we were doing very well. I think we won back-to-back series titles, and again, it's quite opportunistic, really. And then everybody's looking for a hope story in South Africa. Always looking for a hope story. Always looking for a feel-good story out of sport. What do people want to do on a Monday morning? They want to get to the office and they want to talk about the bokke, And if the Bokke aren't winning, then they need to look somewhere else. And that's where we were able to fill the gap and build a lot of our support base through that. I think I've actually said to people, we also have incredibly forgiving fans. Like I've often, as an exercise, I don't try not to read too much into it, but after a good or a poor performance, you get on social media and you just see what people are saying, you know. And after a poor performance, people are still very, very positive, whereas I don't think they give other teams that kind of leeway. So we've been able, I think, through our performance, through our attitude on the field, hopefully through the persona of the people and the character of the people off the field, we've built quite a sort of quite a loyal and forgiving and happy fan base, you know. And that's taken some time. You know, you've got to have the right kind of person in the team. You've got to make sure that every touch point you have with a person has got to be an enjoyable one that sort of uplifts them around you. And that was one of the team's like visions, was touching people's lives. You know, and whether that's on the field, because they look at somebody like a Branko that's, you know, 78 kilos or something like that, but he's doing like miraculous things on the field. Yeah. And a guy in a similar position in his life can look at that and go, well, geez, I mean, if he's doing that kind of thing on the field, like I can do similar stuff, you know. And I think that's probably one of the key features of the Sevens team, is that so many of the characters in the team are very relatable. You know, like if you look at the Springboks, an amazing bunch of athletes, but like I can't relate to a guy who's 2 meters tall and 115 kilos, you know, because I'm just an average Joe. But the Seven side looks like kind of a bunch of average Joes, like guys that could just be your mate from varsity or your cousin from down the road or a friend's friend, you know. So I think that's the relatability of the players and the people there are what's drawn people closer. And then hopefully with every interaction that they've had with anybody on and off the field has been a pleasurable one, an enjoyable one, and it's left them in a better space.
So for you, I mean, playing different teams obviously offers different challenges. I mean, like the Fijian guys are obviously humongous, very kind of in your face. The New Zealand guys are a lot more skillful. What for you is possibly like the biggest match for you or the hardest game to play?
I think Fiji's probably up there. I mean, Fiji's, so I think you had them switched around there. Like New Zealand's in your face and Fiji's got a lot more skill. They're big. They're enormous, but they're contact avoidant. Like they don't like contact at all. Yeah. They avoid all kinds of contact. They move the ball. So they play like the complete antithesis of what we play. Okay. You know, we play quite a structured game. We're very happy to take contact because we're very comfortable in securing our ball. Yeah. Whereas Fiji, I mean, if they could play an entire game without setting up a ruck, that would be great for them. They'd be very happy. Like there's some guys that I don't think they've touched the ground in like 5 years. You know, they carry the ball and they offload through everything. And some of the stuff I look at, I'm like, there's no way that was planned. There was no, and you can't train it. So I don't get it. Like it's incredible what they do, but it's not us. And that's kind of what it comes down to, is that with Sevens you've got all these different styles, and now it's kind of like because everybody's like, okay, well Fiji hammered England, but then England just beat South Africa. So then how does it work? You know, because it's more like a game of rock, paper, scissors. Like, you know, scissors beats paper, but paper beats rock, but rock beats scissors kind of thing. You know? And everybody's got their different ways of unlocking a certain defense. But I'd probably say that Fiji and New Zealand, I mean, England had our number a couple of times, and I don't know if it was just like sort of luck or, no, it's definitely a lot of luck. They were very well structured and very well organized, and they had a good game plan against us. But Fiji is always one that you get very nervous about, because if they're on, they're really on. And it's very, very, very difficult to stop. I mean, when we were with Paul True coaching, then we get quite technical about it, and sort of you look at the different hemispheres of the brain, and your right side of your brain is very free thinking and open and white space, and that's where sort of Fiji would be. They'd be in like the R1 segment of the brain, whereas we're on the left side of the brain, we're very structured and linear, and we like our organization, everything. So the way to play a right-sided brain team is to put them into structure and make them uncomfortable. You don't want to venture into their world because they're bloody good at what they do there, you know. There was a story I told somebody I think it was the 2011 or 12 London final, we played Fiji in the final in London, and like we mauled them 3 times in a sevens game. You know, we mauled them. We had like a 5-man line out, so it's 1 throwing, 5 in the line out, 1 at scrum half.
Yeah.
So nobody in the back line.
Yeah.
So we know we're going to take a ball, and then we mauled them. We scored 2 tries off a maul, and then the other game plan we had, well, part of the game plan was to play between the touchline and the first post. So it's like it's ugly.
Yeah.
But we scored another try after that, and we ended up winning the tournament, you know. And it's, I suppose it's probably like what people are giving the Springbok shit for. Like, you can't play Fiji at free running, flowing rugby because they're going to smash you.
Yeah.
And I remember going up onto the stands where you collect the medals and then get the trophy and everything. And then one of the World Rugby ladies was there, and one of the tournament organizers, and she was like, "Well done. Please don't do that again." She was just like not happy with the way we were playing, or wasn't in the spirit of sevens rugby, which was interesting. It was just like a funny way of doing things, you know.
That's a different way of looking at things, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, to the rugby fan, it's still good to watch. It's good to see the creativity and the difference, because it's not often you'll see a 5-man maul.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can look at it and go, it's creative, but other people are like, that's boring. We want you to throw it around and Hail Mary passes across the field and everything like that. Whereas if you do look at it, it is quite bloody creative. Nobody else is mauling, you know, so we maul. Why not?
It's
South Africa.
creative.
We're good at it. You know?
Exactly.
We actually had Rassi, he came to coach us mauling in when we were still training at Donny Craven at the fields. I remember he came down for a session on mauling. You know, how do we set up a maul with 5 men, and what's the correct structure for it and everything. So we went into depth about it. It wasn't like we just sort of threw it together on the week and go like, oh shit, let's maul against the Fijians. It was a plan, you know. And I think that's the level of detail that we go into, and I don't think people quite understand that. Is that you don't just rock up at a sevens tournament and go, we're playing America. Well, let's do this. Why not? You know?
Yeah, I mean, rugby is a very brutal sport, especially like when you're playing against these guys that are massive and they run extremely hard. And has there been any point in your career, either through an injury or some form of like adversity, that you were like either feeling really hard to get up the next day or carry on playing?
Yeah, it's most second days of the tournament. Okay. Like genuinely, it's and that's what I don't think people understand. Like that you wake up like broken on the next day, the second day of the tournament, and that's the most important day, or you're about to step into the most important match of the whole tournament, the quarterfinal. Yeah. You play 3 pool games on day 1. You get smashed up, and then you go to sleep. Then you wake up and you play this game that if you don't win this game, then your weekend's pretty shit. Like if you win this game, then your weekend gets a hell of a lot better. Yeah. In the semi-finals, you're top 4 of the tournament. Yeah. And that's where you want to be. That's where you want to play the whole weekend.
Yeah, of course.
And I think the one realization, or the one moment where I had like a proper realization of that, was we went through a Las Vegas tournament. Las Vegas was played over 3 days. So it was 2-2-2. And for some reason we were good at that format. So we played 2 pool games on day 1, then day 2 we played a pool game, and then the quarterfinal that evening. And we always seemed to do well in Vegas. And then semi-finals, we won the semi-final, I think against Samoa or something, and then we were playing New Zealand in the final. And I remember sitting there after the semi-final going like, how the hell am I going to do this? Like I was broken, like really buggered, really, you know, and like I just didn't know how I was going to do it. We got onto the field after a warm-up, okay? Kick off, and, you know, kick off to one of the New Zealand guys, and the New Zealand guy who normally runs bloody hard, and he runs into contact, and I'm like, we hit him, and he goes down, and we take another contact, and I go, these oaks are fucked. Like they're just as buggered as we are. Yeah. You know, and then you realize that they're not as explosive as they were. They're hurting just as much as we are. Yeah. And then you're like, oh God, it's all level. Like it's all equal now. Now we've got to be, no, we've got to rise above it. And I think we ended up winning the game. But it was fascinating to go like, I was completely doubting, I suppose, myself and maybe us. Yeah. Going like, I'm shattered. But those oaks were broken, dude. They were worse off than we were. Yeah. To the extent that they, you know, we ended up beating them quite well, I think. But it's not like, that's not new. Every tournament, that's not new. Every tournament that happens, and but we train for that. You know, the coaching. I mean, the training weeks that we have at home, the training sessions at home are rough. They're very, very rough. I mean, like the kind of stuff that the guys go through to put their bodies into to prepare for the tournament is hard, man. Like they'll make sure, the coaching staff will make sure that you'll have 2 or 3 days to mimic what you do in a tournament, where you wake up on a Wednesday morning in Stellenbosch and you look ahead at the schedule and you've got 3 big sessions ahead of you. You know, it's either 2 field sessions and some kind of like a gym cardio session.
Crazy, yeah.
And you get up and you got to do it. Like, and it's not, you know, you don't try to take the whole picture at once. You sort of arrive for the first session, you know, fight through the first session well, and you're like, okay, cool, that's one of them down. And so you get used to that. And I think it's funny because like I just finished riding the Cape Epic, and a lot gets made of it, like, and how physical and how brutal it was. And everybody, like a lot of people on the water stops were going like, oh, you know, is this tougher than rugby? I'm like, and I want to say to them, the only reason I'm here is because I play rugby.
Yeah.
The only reason I can do this is because of what I went through, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that what makes it difficult for the normal guy is that he wakes up on the 3rd day of riding or 4th day of riding, and he's sore and he's got to go sit on the bike for 6 hours now.
Unfamiliar.
Completely. And like for me, it's like it's not a comfort zone, but I'm absolutely happy to do it. Like I wake up really sore. I know what to do to get my body ready. Yeah. Then you get on the bicycle again, you ride again, you know. And that's what, like, for me, it was fine, you know. It's a good, hard challenge and a great adventure, but all through the preparation of what I've been through for the last 10 years.
So, I mean, that's obviously a very mental thing, and I was going to ask you, how important is your mentality when playing rugby, and how has it shaped your mentality in your everyday life?
Yeah, I think you build a hell of a lot of resilience, for one. You know, I think as South Africans, we're pretty resilient people. I think there's enough crap that gets thrown our way, I mean, on a daily basis. But it's like a resilience thing and a perseverance, and just getting up and just taking that first step, really. And I think that's generally what gets a lot of people through tough times in their life, is just getting up and taking that first step. Yeah. As opposed to just sitting there and hoping for the situation to change around you, because it doesn't. It won't. And why should it? You know, there's enough people out there that are working hard enough to make things work for themselves. Like, you're going to sit still and not make things work for you. Yeah. It's going to get hard. And I think that's where sport is built. Like, a lot of that is where you go through the dark places and you go through a lot of pain. And I suppose that's you know, the teamwork side of it, and the community, well, teamwork and then off the field community is what also helps you get through. Like, very seldom do you get through things alone. Yeah. You know, and I think maybe that's where South African men struggle a little bit, is like the desire or this urge to be brave and tough, and like without the support of anybody, because now I can get through it alone, you know, kind of thing, that kind of mentality. Whereas nobody really does things alone, in all honesty. Like, we're all leaning on each other for something. Yeah. And the sooner we realize that, the quicker we're going to be able to get through difficult times. The quicker we're going to be able to, and more successfully, and sort of probably be living in a better space for more time than what we currently are. Like, you don't have to do anything alone. There's always somebody there, and there's always somebody that's been through a similar stage in their life, or been through a similar event or something. And maybe that's one of the values of like social media or like the internet, is that it can bring people that's been through similar things so much closer together. Yeah. Or at least you can access their stories so much quicker. And I think that's where this podcast thing is quite
exactly.
Good. You know, is where if you can find the right people that are willing to tell stories. Yeah. And people listen and go like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I went through that.
Exactly. Know? So I think that for me is one of the biggest reasons why I've started this podcast. Is you get to a point in your life where something happens and you feel alone, you feel isolated, and it's a very difficult situation to kind of wake up the next day and carry on with life, you know, especially when there's a person missing or something missing from your life. And to listen to people like yourselves and a lot of the other guys that I've had on the podcast, it's really helpful and really inspiring, and the feedback I get from it is amazing. And I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for the chat. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for what you're doing. I think people like to listen to conversations, and people like to, you know, unpack things a little bit more and spend time on things and get into people's heads. And I mean, if we're not going to do this and you're just going to keep quiet about things the whole time,
Yeah.
then nobody's really knowing what's going on around them.
Exactly.
It takes so much. It takes a bit of courage from people just to open up a little bit and take
Yeah.
that first step. And
Yeah.
I think that word vulnerability gets thrown around quite a lot these days. But that's it. That's just put yourself out there. And when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, like, are you really putting yourself out there to get hurt? No, you're putting yourself out there so that you can get help.
Yeah. And at the same time, it also helps other people.
Yeah.
Like when you're having these conversations, someone listening, like it's going to help me having this conversation with you, listening to how you deal with your own adversities and something like that. And then someone else listening to it goes, if they relate to something, or it will help them.
Yeah.
It will help them to understand and know that someone else there is there to have the chat. And
I think what's quite interesting with a lot of people listening to podcasts is that you don't, I mean, as we're doing this, I don't intend for somebody to take the entire package and go like, oh, that whole thing spoke to me.
Yeah.
There'll be like one thing.
Of course.
One or two hopefully little nuggets that'll be like, okay, I quite enjoyed that.
Of course.
It often happens with me. I listen to something and it can be 3 hours long.
Yeah.
But I literally took 32 seconds of it. And that's what was valuable to me.
There's always one message,
Yeah.
at least one message from something that you can take,
sure.
especially from a podcast. But Kyle, I just want to say a massive thank you.
Sweet, man.
I really appreciate you coming on, and so good to meet you. For me, as like as a rugby fan, it's awesome. And thank you, and congratulations on an amazing career.
Thanks
and thanks for everything you did for the box. It was class. It was class. It was great.
It was a good time from my side too. Don't worry.
Great. Thank you so much.
Man.